Welcome. Have you ever wondered how massive companies, or even small startups, actually get anything done? Well, it all comes down to a plan, an internal structure. Today, we're going to explore that very plan, their corporate blueprint. Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with our learning objectives. Then we'll get into the core building blocks of any organization. After that, we'll compare different structures, touch on some cool modern designs, and wrap it all up with key takeaways and a couple of practice questions. All right, first things first, let's lay the foundation by looking at what you'll be able to really understand by the end of this explainer. So these are the key skills you're going to walk away with. Being able to explain and compare these different concepts, well, it's absolutely crucial for your DP business management studies. So let's get right to it. Okay, on to our first section. You know how every architectural blueprint has a legend that explains what all the symbols mean? Well, an organizational structure is pretty much the same. Our legend is just a set of core concepts. Let's define those key terms. Now, this chart might look a little intense, but don't worry about all the tiny details. At its core, an organizational chart is just a map. It shows who has authority, who reports to whom, and the official paths for communication. Think of it as the entire company's master plan, all in one picture. A really key part of any structure is delegation. This is all about managers trusting their team members enough to hand over some responsibility. And listen, it's not just about getting more done. When it's done right, delegation can seriously boost motivation and efficiency all across the company. Next up, we've got the span of control. This one's simple. It's just how many people a manager is directly in charge of. So a wide span means a manager has a lot of people reporting to them, pretty common in modern companies. A narrow span means they only oversee a few, which you'll see in more traditional layered businesses. And finally, there's the chain of command. This is the formal path for instructions and information inside a business. A great way to picture it is as the official communication highway, running from the CEO's office all the way down to the shop floor. The military is a classic example of an organization with a very long and very rigid chain of command. So now that we have the building blocks down, let's look at two classic designs for a company's blueprint. Are we building a tall, traditional skyscraper with lots of floors, or are we going with a modern, open-plan bungalow? Now, what's really cool here is just how different these look. On the right, you've got the tall structure, lots of layers, narrow span of control. This is your typical, large, traditional organization, maybe like a big national bank. Then on the left, you see the flat structure. It's much more spread out. This is common in tech companies like Google in its early days to really encourage innovation. And this table just lays out the trade-offs perfectly. Tall structures, they offer really clear promotion path and more support from your boss. The downside, communication can be painfully slow. Flat structures, on the other hand, are great for fast communication and giving employees more responsibility, but, the managers can get totally overworked. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about the flow of power. See, it's not just about the shape of the structure, it's also about where the big decisions are made. In other words, who holds the master key? This is a fundamental question every business has to answer. Think about a huge fast food chain, like McDonald's. Does a local store manager get to create a brand new burger, or does that decision have to come all the way from corporate headquarters? The core idea here is really simple. With centralization, all the decision-making power is concentrated with the senior managers at the very center. That's like McDonald's deciding the global Big Mac recipe. With decentralization, that power is pushed outwards, empowering local managers to make their own decisions, like offering a special menu item just for their region. The business world is always changing, right? So the blueprints have to adapt. The traditional models don't always work anymore. So let's take a quick look at a more modern, flexible design that's really built for a fast-paced environment. This diagram shows what's called a matrix structure. The key thing here is that it's organized by both function and project. For example, at a company like NASA, an engineer would report to their department head, like propulsion, but they'd also report to the specific project manager for, say, the Artemis mission. This model is fantastic for tackling really complex jobs that need expertise from all over the company. We have covered a lot of ground, from the basic building blocks all the way to modern designs. Now, let's make sure that knowledge is cemented in. We'll summarize the key takeaways and then give you a chance to practice. So the most important takeaway is this. There is no single perfect blueprint. A A tall, centralized structure might be perfect for the military, while a flat, decentralized one is just right for a creative ad agency. The absolute best design always depends on the company's specific size, its goals, and the market it's operating in. All right, now it's your turn to apply what you've learned. Here's a typical exam-style question. I want you to think back to what we talked about with empowering employees and responding to customers. Take a moment and think about how you would answer this first question for 4 marks. And for a final thought, have a look at this 6-mark comparison question. It's asking you to weigh the pros and cons of those classic blueprints we discussed. How does the skyscraper stack up against the bungalow? Thinking through these kinds of questions is truly the best way to prepare for your assessments.